Hey, good morning. Happy Father's Day. Welcome to Who's Left This Week, the unapologetically progressive Sunday morning political news show for Indiana. Our opening theme is by Hoosier singer-songwriter Leslie Nuss, and my name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I am broadcasting from Bloomington. We've got an incredibly packed show this week. We will look at Trump's offensive birthday bash, an Iran deal undermined before the ink was dry, Peter Thiel's secret society roster drops, federal prosecutors charge anti-ICE protesters with conspiracy, plus lots of Indiana news sprinkled throughout. All of that and much more. But before we begin, you know the drill. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We certainly don't have billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. It is a foundational principle of Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network that we refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, and it is a lot of work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that's okay. You can still help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding our content to your people. You get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making the state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. Follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it is PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Now, let us welcome this week's panelists. First, one of our returning favorites. You know him. You love him. It's Hancock County Democratic Vice Chair Chuck Gill. Chuck, welcome.
Hi,
I was
Scott.
worried you weren't going to make it in on time. You snuck in under the limbo bar. Great to see you. How you feeling?
Well, aside from being mobility challenged at the moment due to a back injury, hanging in, but ready to have a great show.
Well, thank you for being here. Greatly appreciate it, and we hope you are back to 100% soon. All right. Also, let us welcome in a newcomer to this space, first timer out in Terre Haute. There, it is State Senate District 38 Democratic nominee Casey Blundell. Casey, welcome. Casey, I can't hear you. You are on mute. Hey, there she is.
Good morning.
So glad to have you here on this space, Casey. We love the limited interaction we have had with you in other spaces to this point. I am glad to share your effervescent presence with the Who's Left This Week audience.
Well, I'm very happy to be here and excited for today.
I'm so glad you joined us. And what's this? Good God, it's Sharon White's music. We've got a secret Sharon White bomb.
Good morning, Scott.
Good morning. Sharon is in Terre Haute with Casey this morning. What brings you to the 812?
So I pretty much my entire family lives down here in Terre Haute, and one of my cousins got married last night, and Casey was gracious enough to open her home to me. We have had a blast this weekend. Haven't done too much damage down here in Terre Haute, but was very grateful that she offered to let me stay with her so that way I could come down and see family.
Well, you still got a couple hours there to do some damage. If not you, before the tornadoes come through again. We are expecting some more weather this afternoon. Indiana, the new tornado alley. So, so much to get to today. We're going to have to sprint through some of these stories. And let's go ahead and get right into it as we come up on the 5-minute mark. So, right on time. Let us pick up where we left off last Sunday when President Trump threw himself a big white trash birthday bash on the White House lawn, complete with dirt bikes doing bat flips, sweaty men's rolling around on top of each other, and rank racism and transphobia. After winning his match, UFC fighter Josh Hogan insulted Michelle Obama during a post-fight interview with Joe Rogan, repeating the insane conspiracy theory perpetuated for years by Alex Jones and others that the former First Lady is really a man. White supremacists have consistently caricatured black women as physically masculine throughout American history. So this is not new. Michelle and Barack Obama, as is typical, stayed above the fray, not answering directly, but responding with grace, eloquence, dignity, and a couple veiled jabs at the current guy in twin speeches as the Obama Presidential Center opened in Chicago Thursday, with the kind of A-list attendees that Trump only wishes he could draw. Let us start with Casey. Casey, thoughts?
Where does one even begin? So I'm going to say, I'm sorry. I did watch the fights. More for just to see what kind of awfulness was happening.
Everybody loves a train wreck.
It was a train wreck, right? You want to look away, but you can't. I was offended for our military. Because you just have these men who have very thick histories of domestic violence, stemming all the way. Mr. White, several of the fighters have gotten in trouble. So why are we celebrating the worst parts of America?
It seems like that whole thing, the fight, the dirt bikes, the flyover again. This is all privately paid for. This is UFC. They're paying for this thing. Yeah, well, they didn't pay for the flyover. They used the military on these things, and just the public resources, the Secret Service, all of that. But Chuck, like, listen, we've heard these disgusting this conspiracy theory for years, and this has always been a way to dehumanize black women in this country in particular, and it is disgusting, and especially someone as brilliant and beautiful as Michelle Obama does not need to put up with this crap from, a guy who's, probably had his head smashed in a few times.
No, that's completely fair. So I guess full disclosure, I was a martial artist in a good chunk of my life, and I used to watch UFC way back when in the dark ages. But what it has become and the environment it fosters now has totally gone in a wrong direction. And the other thing that occurred to me is this comment about Mrs. Obama. She to me is the closest I can equate to Jackie Kennedy, as far as grace and intelligence and just everything that a first lady should be and model for the future leaders of our nation. And I get a little emotional with this because the Obamas to me were what I felt was a new beginning for us as a country. I felt it was opening a better chapter in our history. Although sadly, we've fallen into our worst selves in that chapter instead of our better selves. So now we're presented with the choice of go high, yes, but not to dignify the stupidity that's being shown by these folks. I mean, this person that made this comment, I'm sorry, he's poster child for some, real deep psychological evaluation. I would venture to say, but there's definitely some things there.
Yeah, and not great. And listen, Michelle Obama has higher favorability ratings. She's probably one of the most popular and well-beloved political figures in this country, more so than even her husband, certainly more so than Trump and any of his cronies. Sharon, the Obama Presidential Center opened on Thursday. Springsteen was there. Bono and The Edge were there. A-list celebrities abound. Trump has got like his D-list reality stars and stuff, and the worst dregs of the stand-up community. at his events. You think it rubs him the wrong way a little bit? You think he's jealous?
I try not to think too much about what Donald thinks. I don't want to get too much into his head. Here's what I will say. I was in a space with someone who was watching the fights on Sunday night. I was watching them against my will. I've told you before that Washington, D.C. is my favorite city in the country. I love Washington, D.C. And I was thinking about security risks for the fact that we had, we have all this conversation about foreign nationals coming into our country, all of this concern about it. And yet we have people walking through the White House, through spaces that they are not normally allowed to be. I felt like it was disrespectful to the People's House. I felt like it was disrespectful to the military who were part of the pageantry. And I felt like it was disrespectful to the people of the United States, most especially people like Michelle and Barack Obama. I actually watched Michelle's speech I cried through Michelle's speech last night as I was kind of winding down from everything. And like the fact that they can still, that her and Barack can still infuse humor into everything and make everything feel just a little bit more okay is such a testament to both of them.
I wish I had half of their grace and patience. I don't know how they do it. So let's move on and talk about Donald Trump's other birthday present last week. Of course, in addition to his very own personal UFC exhibition, he got a peace deal with Iran for his birthday last Sunday, or at least the announcement of a tentative memorandum of understanding. The 60-day agreement was to reopen shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, end hostilities on all fronts, including Lebanon, and give the sides time to work on the details surrounding Iran's nuclear program. According to Vice President J.D. Vance, the agreement is a very general document and merely returns the sides to a pre-war status quo. It is much thinner than the 2015 JCPOA negotiated by the Obama administration, has no mechanisms in place to monitor the Islamic Republic's uranium stockpile, only promises toll-free passage through the strait for the 60 days of the agreement, and commits up to $300 billion in reconstruction funding to Iran. Even with this deal in place, it could take weeks or even months for the shipping of oil and petroleum products to return to normal. So before we even get into what had happened later in this week, let's on the ground, let's look at the deal itself. Chuck, $300 billion to Iran in reparations, let's call it what it is. You remember, stay on the Obama thread, you remember when Obama was going to free up something like $1.4 billion in Iran's own money to as part of the JCPOA as a reward for like complying with the terms of the agreement? You remember the fit that Republicans threw over that?
Yeah, this totality of how stupid this whole thing was is just almost beyond belief, because here we are, we've gone through all this, and I think it's just because Trump he wants to one up Obama on everything. He wants to show that he can do better somehow, some way than President Obama did. And I'm sorry, he's failing on every attempt. And the sad part is we are in a worse position now with this supposed deal than we were beforehand. And the fact that all this money is changing hands much more than what the GCPOA was just makes you wonder, is like, okay, define hypocrisy. I mean, because that's exactly, you're literally paying them a heck of a lot more money for what we already had. And where's this? First off, my question is, okay, sanctioned money, I get that. Okay, that's theirs. We were holding on to it. Okay, fine. But the extra $300 billion in damage that we caused by choice, where does that make sense? Where could we use that money otherwise for the country? Make it make sense. And
Well,
I'm sorry, I can't.
Apparently that's not going to come from taxpayers, and it's some $300 billion investment fund that's going to go through Gulf allies and investors and whatnot. We'll see.
Just like
they
the
said that
ballroom.
about Paul too, right? But you said no. He wants to one up Obama. Casey, he could have. Like they had an agreement in place, like the day before the bombing started in Iran back in late February. The Omani foreign minister flew to Washington and said, "Look, we have a deal. It goes even farther than the JCPOA." Trump could have said right there, "Did better than Obama." And then when we could have stopped, but he's got to go on and start this war, which has gone on to disastrous effects. And now we've got this agreement, which isn't even really an agreement. It's like a concept of a plan, right?
Sorry, that was awesome.
I am of the thinking with this administration that I'll believe it when I see it. Because let's say Taco. So the amount of money, the amount of damage that has been done to the American taxpayers, to the citizens of Iran, those children, is disgusting. And the fact that anybody could just sit there and be okay or even celebrate what was announced this week is disgusting.
Well, and like, okay, it sounded good, right? At least the shooting's stopping. At least we're going to get stuff moving in the Strait of Hormuz again. We're going to free up the global economy. Oh, not so fast, my friend. So, this thing's not even holding. Before the ink was dry, Israel unleashed over 150 airstrikes in Lebanon on Friday, killing at least 47 people. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Iran is not bound by the memorandum and will remain in southern Lebanon indefinitely, leading Trump to issue the sharpest public criticism of an Israeli prime minister by a U.S. president in modern history, saying at the G7, quote, "Without me, there would be no Israel." And Vance, the vice president, canceled his trip to Switzerland for negotiations and issued the following quote: "Donald J. Trump was the only head of state in the entire world who was sympathetic to the nation of Israel at this moment in time. If I was in the cabinet of the Israeli government, I might not be attacking the only powerful ally that I have anywhere left in the entire world." End quote. Oh shit, it's the Onion meme. Heartbreaking. The worst person you know just made a great point. And with further Israeli action in Lebanon, a flagrant violation of the ceasefire, Iran once again closed the Strait of Hormuz on Saturday. Sharon, I feel like it's Groundhog's Day. We've been doing this every week for the past month. Oh, look, there's a ceasefire. There's a plan. We're going to stop shooting. And by the time the weekend rolls around, there's some sort of wrench thrown in the wheels, and we are right back where we started.
Yeah. I believe I was on the show back in February. Chuck and I were on the show together back in February, basically the week that this started, where we were getting the exact same messages that we are getting now. At least this week, I mean, compared to last week, at least this week, you didn't have stuff Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and for like all 6 days. It was a little bit, or at least it felt a little bit quieter. But I saw something last night where Trump was going after the Italian prime minister, and she basically shot back like, "Hey, you don't really have a leg to stand on, buddy." And
yeah,
we started, this decade with a good number of allies, and we've somehow managed to, what's the word I'm looking for? Alienate every single one of them, except for one that, for whatever reason, which of course we could get into the historical implications of this, but for whatever reason is the one that we have decided is our ultimate ally. And it is becoming more and more problematic, clearly, by the day, especially when you have one leadership team that says we're signing a peace deal and the other one says we weren't involved in that, so we're just going to keep doing what we want.
this closure of the Strait of Hormuz again Saturday after this deal, after Netanyahu says we are not a party to this, we're going to do whatever we want. Iran is essentially saying to Trump, "Come get your boy." Like, we if and I hate to give credit, but Trump and Vance are both criticizing Israel and Netanyahu and the way they are acting more severely than I have seen in the past. And maybe they can actually start to rein in this rogue state that seems to be walking us into war throughout the Middle East and out of longstanding relationships with all of our other allies. Let's talk about some of our other allies. Trump was over in Europe this week for the G7. Vice President Vance was due to head to Switzerland for negotiations, as we mentioned, and apparently will still head there in the next few days, joining Trump envoy Steve Witkoff and son-in-law Jared Kushner, the keystone cops of international diplomacy, to hammer out the details of this long-term peace deal, supposedly. Now, this follows 3 days of G7 meetings where Trump notably stayed the duration after cutting out after only a day at last year's summit. The gathering produced unity on issues that have divided Trump from U.S. allies, including praise over this Iran deal, which was holding at the time they were talking about it, and a joint statement of support for Ukraine. Of course, Trump undercut the rest of the allies on China, praising President Xi, even as the group issued a joint statement vowing coordinated action against, quote, Chinese economic coercion. The meeting took place even as protesters voiced their displeasure with the summit, drawing some 20,000 mostly peaceful protesters last Sunday in Geneva. Sharon, I'm going to come right back to you here. Is the G7 a thing that is still useful in this time? Is it still valuable? And is it going to hold?
So I was just thinking about this. I don't remember hearing about the G7 nearly as much as we have in the past decade prior to this. I said to someone earlier this week, I'm like, didn't we just do the G7? Like, it doesn't feel like it's been a year. And I always thought that the G7 was every few years. I did not realize it was every year because it was this situation where we were not having to pay as much attention to what was going on in our government. We kind of just let it do what it needed to do. And it seems like this year that perhaps there was more pandering to our dear leader, just based on some of the photos and videos I've seen and the signing of whatever it was they signed in Versailles. And now I'm just excited I got to say the word Versailles on camera. 10 years of French right there, folks. But I
pronounce Versailles if you're in Indiana.
That made me cringe almost as much as your Donald Trump. But I think that we're not doing a great job working together overall across leadership teams. And so I don't know if G7 is still a useful exercise at this point.
And Casey, this thing, drew a lot of protesters. And it always does, whether it was the G7 or the G8 back when Russia was still involved, or the G20. These things always draw large volumes of protesters, mostly peaceful. There was a little bit of, property damage there in Geneva last Sunday, but it is always directed at the sort of the capitalist free market globalization aspect of the G7. These are the world's biggest free market, quote unquote, economies that go across the world and extract from the global south and everywhere else, and automate and put folks out of work in the global north, and a symbol very much of an unfair economic system. Would you say?
Yes. So I think that's a lot to unpack, Scott. So I was listening to what Sharon said and the usefulness and of the G7, and I'm struggling with it as well. And I absolutely understand the protesting, and all of it just makes sense, right? So you have a group of people who are the richest nations in the world. And I'm thinking of the flags that I'm looking at right now. And half of them have quality of life issues. So how can we even begin to celebrate when the population of these countries are struggling to survive? The United States included.
And so and the host country as well has its own difficulties. And I mentioned that the U.S. and our allies go across the world to the global south. We bomb these countries and then make them unlivable. And what happens to the human beings that live there? They go try to make themselves a life somewhere. And we think often of these Northern European countries like Switzerland as progressive, but it is important to note there is a nativist strain gripping their countries as well as ours. Swiss voters last week only narrowly rejected a far-right proposal to cap the country's population, which would have triggered tough restrictions on immigration and forced the mountainous landlocked country to withdraw from the EU's free movement agreement. The major political parties there and business groups opposed the referendum, which ultimately lost by a 55 to 45% margin, which was much closer than expected. Chuck, you see this stuff in Sweden too, right? Their far-right party has come to power in recent years. Sweden, Switzerland, what's going on?
I'm trying to figure out how I can phrase this without stepping on myself here. So the problem that we're seeing is because of the disharmony and everything that we've allowed to occur here is providing something of a permission structure for these other entities in other countries to kind of take a cue and say, hey, it worked there. Let's see what we can do. And sadly, they're mimicking a lot of the idiocracy that we're seeing here in our own country. Casey was talking about leadership in these other areas. And in some countries, I agree there is leadership. Other, I think it is tag along and see what happens type of mindset. To see Switzerland go through this kind of idea, I mean, that is disturbing on the face of it, just because they've typically universally been quote unquote neutral, kind of been safe space, just so to say. But again, I think it is this, for lack of a permission set that has been provided to say, to be as ugly as possible, to put down all these things that we've been striving for the last 100 years, or roughly about 100 years since World War II. All the progress we've tried to make, and it's disheartening because it seems like everything is rolling backwards, and it's not a free market system anymore. It is a captured market system, and it's cannibalistic capitalism essentially. So it's and when you have that system, all the other nonsense kind of follows in behind it. So it's just, I mean, it's a lot of different things happening simultaneously.
We'll talk
scary.
about some of the folks who are perpetuating that unfair economic system here later in the show. And we can't also forget that there is a sort of a foreign intrigue element to the unrest being fostered in the United States and Europe, like Russia, China, Iran use social media, sock puppet accounts, and other things to stoke that internal outrage and weaken the countries from the inside. And that's a whole other thing we can talk about. But let's talk about Indiana here for a second. And as the oil shock resulting from the Iran war sent gas prices through the roof, Indiana Governor Mike Braun responded by temporarily removing the state's gas tax, right? Saved Hoosiers some 62 cents per gallon at the pump, which most people who are filling up their tank appreciate. but this costs the state roughly $140 million a month, and local governments around $170 million total by the end of this month. Counties are already cutting projects. Fulton County cutting 15 miles of paving and halving its chip and seal projects. Miami County postponed replacing their aging vehicle fleet. Community Crossings matching grant program funding a dozen fewer projects per month. Braun says the state will backfill local lost revenue, but there is no specific plan at the time. Casey, again, I'm sure anybody filling up their tank appreciates the savings, but our roads are already not in great shape. So, are you seeing issues already there? It's construction season. Are there less cones than usual?
Indiana has the 4th best roads in the nation. I know you saw that announcement, so I'm shocked.
Yeah. I wonder who's putting together those theories.
Who did they interview? The Governor Braun, who used a helicopter. Roads are great when you fly.
Great for him, right? Smooth sailing.
Right. Oh my gosh.
So, those of us on the campaign trail, like my district covers 3 counties. My gas bill sucks. But I can't see Governor Braun backfilling. But also, we can still fund all this and more because we have a multi-billion with a B surplus. So there's no need to cut these projects. Sorry. We're not really losing revenue because we already have it. I mean,
well, and we talk about this here all the time. Sharing a surplus, to Casey's point, is a sign that you're not funding public services properly. And listen, if we had legalized cannabis, we'd probably have a lot more cushion than what Casey's already talking about.
A surplus. So, my thoughts on government is, well, according to our major document, it's for the people, by the people. Government should never be run as a private business, which means it should not be for profit. You should almost never have a surplus, and definitely never have a surplus that large.
Yeah, I was on, this isn't coming out for a while, but I was on fellow Progressive Indiana Network podcaster Brianna Newhart's podcast my first night here in Terre Haute. And I was like, I believe a balanced budget is the responsible way to do this. I personally have driven to Bloomington, Indianapolis, and Terre Haute in the past month for various things from the northern part of the state. I have experienced all of the major roadways except for I-65 going up north. And our roads are not in good shape. Our highways are not in good shape. Our city streets are not in good shape. And I personally have seen every single one of them. And the fact that we have this massive surplus that keeps getting touted and no plan for how we're going to use that surplus to help the people of Indiana is just, it is irresponsible. I believe that's the word that Casey just used. It is utterly irresponsible.
Yeah. Indianapolis, I don't know if you've had a chance to be in the capital city, driving on some of those side streets lately. They will swallow your car. And Chuck, our hospitals will swallow your entire life savings. Just as Braun cited affordability in instituting a gas tax holiday, he's also citing costs to Hoosiers as impetus for cracking down on hospital prices. Indiana Capitol Chronicle this week highlighting a new state law that went into effect last year, the results of which we're expecting a report about at the end of this month. The law caps what Indiana's 5 largest nonprofit hospital networks can charge employer-based insurance plans, with hospitals that exceed that threshold by 2029 losing their tax-exempt status. A similar law in Oregon saved over $100 million in its first 2 years, with similar legislation pending in Colorado and New York. Now, what the common thing about Oregon, Colorado, and New York, those are all blue states. Indiana putting price controls on the hospitals now. The free market folks must not be happy about Governor Braun in that regard.
Well, and it's funny because I will say that having spent last week a few days in the hospital, I kind of, I will caveat to say our local hospital did a fantastic job taking care of me. I can sing their praises, but I also know that those folks work at a very demanding and underfunded, a lot of these larger entities, the support for local medical services is crashing out. I mean, it's almost being obliterated. And I'm sorry, the fact that, okay, yes, we're instituting price controls. Okay, great. Well, now what's the other part to that equation? What's the fallout? And how does that affect care in rural areas? How does that affect, women's health care, especially? I mean, OBs are closing all over the place. Primary care physicians are becoming harder to get a hold of. Specialty care, like I have to go and see a spine specialist tomorrow to get an injection to hopefully get me back walking again normally, or as close to it as I ever was. So it's just when you boil it all down, okay, yes, you're instituting price controls, but what are you doing? What's the other side to that equation? What is the benefit? Where is that extra savings? Is it going to be invested? Is it going to be invested in Medicare? Is it going to be invested in helping those that are disadvantaged and can't get care on a normal basis and are struggling just to even survive? I highly doubt that that's going to be the case, but that's what it should be. And to Casey's point, the balanced budget idea is an absolutely great idea, and surpluses to a point can be a good thing if they are used properly. Going back in, and I can say this from a municipality standpoint, funding for projects is absolutely brutal right now. It's hard, and trying to find that mix of, yes, we still have to do infrastructure work, we still have to do all these things, but they keep cutting off our avenues federally and statewide. So again, it's like, okay, you're talking about affordability, you're dabbling in one area, but you're forgetting everything else over here. You got to bring those together somehow or the other, and I don't think Braun has got that idea planned out, or nor does he really honestly care, in my opinion. But that's
just the way we run our economy in this state and in this country in general is so skewed toward the folks at the top, and that includes some of these private hospital corporations and even the ones that are nonprofit. That they might not make a profit, but they just keep rewarding the administrators in these things. The books are balanced, no profit, but the wrong people are making out like bandits, and the folks that are directly taking care of you, they have to work even harder. Let us talk about another thing affecting affordability in our state, and that is the high price of Indiana's utilities. And this week, Indiana's Office of Utility Consumer Counselor, the state's ratepayer advocate, accused Duke Energy, the largest utility in the state, of over-collecting over $90 million from customers. This is money that the Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission never authorized when approving Duke's rate order in early 2025. And the IURC this week approved a $70 million rate increase for AES, the provider in Indianapolis. Now, this is only about 7% of what the utility requested, but consumers will still see about $10 per month added to their bills. Governor Braun asked the IURC to reconsider this rate increase. Remember, he cast himself as the, quote, new sheriff in town in signing a law earlier this year to rein in ballooning utility costs. And sadly, that irony was not noted in any of the mainstream publications covering Braun's protestations. He is the guy who appointed the members of the IURC who approved these rate hikes. And I had to go to the far-right tabloid Hoosier Inquirer to find that framing. Yeah. Capital Chronicle dropped the ball in that regard. Normally they do great work. Indy Star didn't mention that Braun appointed these people, Chuck. And now he wants to claim credit for pushing back and saying, hey, you guys, you shouldn't approve that rate hike. He knew it was coming, didn't he?
Yeah, and again, sorry, I have to laugh or I'd cry because it's just, for working in the utility space like I do, it makes life so much harder when you hear of these type of things. When you hear that, hey, we're making these changes to the IURC, they're supposed to be the governance, quote unquote, of utility structures, and yet these electrical companies keep going for these rate increases. And they'll say in their briefings, this is to sustain infrastructure changes due to demand and, blah, 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 and all this stuff. And not to get too far ahead of it, but, they claim the data centers are the problem because it. But in the fact that, yes, they're getting record profits for their people for different, these different things. I understand paying your people. I get that because you want to have good people working for you. You want to take care of those folks. But there is a when you're paying multi-million dollars to a CEO that is sitting in a chair half the time and not really engaging with what's actually happening, that's not investing in the utility, or that's not investing in the people. So the fact that he is claiming that, oh, I'm pushing back on, I mean, I'm sorry, when you appointed former Senator Zay to the board, again, define irony in totality. I mean, that guy is not a budget expert, I guess I will say. Sorry,
No, he was a political ally who got a cushy appointment as a reward for his loyal service to the party and the governor. And Casey, again, one of these things. You can see the state. We talk about this all the time. The utility companies are some of the biggest political spenders on candidates, particularly Republicans, but also Democrats. Don't get me wrong. In the state, and they are rewarded handsomely for it when it comes time to set rates. Got Duke Energy throwing any money your way?
No. Actually, Duke Energy and I went round and round several years ago. I won. They destroyed my backyard and a fence and my garden, and because they took the easy way out and not the right way. Instead of using their easement, they drove a truck straight through my backyard. So but that's for another day. But I want to touch on, did anyone happen to read Governor Braun's Facebook statuses about this issue? Because it made me giggle. He said, and I quote, "My top priority is affordability, which is why I am deeply disappointed by the IURC's approval of another AES rate increase. Hoosiers have spent years tightening their belts and making tough financial decisions. It's time for utility companies to do the same." I know he didn't type that because I think he would have been struck by lightning.
He's very concerned. He's almost as concerned as Susan Collins, right? And Sharon, I'm going to come to you here next, but let's frame this in its proper place. And one of the things driving the utility prices, as Chuck said, is the proliferation of these high energy consumption AI data centers now being built across the state. Now, this week, Park County set rules for data center development in their area as neighboring Clay and Sullivan counties struggle with the fallout of new builds. Boone County adopted a one-year data center moratorium, becoming the 12th county to pass such an ordinance. Of course, this doesn't touch the LEAP district and the massive Meta campus being built there, as that parcel of land was annexed to the city of Lebanon and doesn't fall in the county's jurisdiction. Now, AI is not just a concern here in Indiana, where much of the infrastructure is being built. At that G7 meeting we discussed earlier, several tech CEOs joined the elected leaders for a working lunch regarding AI safety on the summit's final day. While in Washington, Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders proposed giving the public a direct stake in these AI firms. He unveiled legislation to create a $7 trillion sovereign wealth fund financed by a one-time tax on the stock of the largest AI companies, making the American public a major shareholder. Sanders saying, quote, "The benefits cannot simply go to a handful of wealthy corporations. They will be shared by the American people." Sharon, is that a good idea?
To recover first.
I get to break out the Trump every week. I don't get to break out the Bernie Sanders, and when I get a chance, I'm going to do it.
To be fair, Bernie Sanders was better than Trump.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, the Bernie impression did not want to make me gag. Okay, I'll throw that there.
It didn't send a visceral body reaction. Well, clearly it did, because here I am. Oh man. Data centers are not good. There we go. I actually think, to the point, we've talked about utilities. Chuck, you're not.
I'm sorry, he's killing me. Love it.
Sorry, Brianna requested the Trump.
I saw the comment.
Ask and you shall
I
receive.
knew it was coming.
Listen, I'm a people pleaser.
Okay.
Oh my god.
Did I miss the Trump dance? Because I'm over here losing.
You did. You were laughing.
That's probably not the worst thing. Oh man. By the way, Brianna, I was singing your praises just a little bit ago. But a point was made in our private chat, or it might have been in one of the chats. Utilities, hospitals, data centers, all of these things should be partially owned by the public. We need to get back to where we were in the early 1900s with antitrust laws and with breaking up monopolies and making sure that the American people are taken care of. I am really intrigued and kind of proud to see that there are counties that are pushing back and are saying, not in our neighborhood, not right now. And I think that the more we see that type of pushback, quite frankly, it makes it a little bit, quote unquote, I don't want to use this word, but it's the one I have, easier if I make it into the State House, if Casey makes it into the State House, for us to call for something like a full moratorium until the point where we are able to figure out the environmental impacts of data centers, the utility impacts, the water impacts, all of those different things from data centers. It makes it a lot easier if counties have already started that process for us to make that type of call in the State House. I recovered, and I feel like I should be given credit for that.
Oh, mad credit. And I just want to add one thing on this, Sharon. You hit right on the ballpark. Like in Hancock County, we actually have a committee that is recommending limitations for these type of projects. But one thing I had expressly spoken with Ethan Lawson about, our current representative for District 53, I told him that if data centers want to come in, one, they need to pay for all the infrastructure that they are putting in to a community, period, end of story. Two, they should be a net zero impact on the system, meaning they should do green self-generation aspect to that. I mean, there is enough room in some of these places. You could put solar panels through the whole property and offset a bunch. The diesel generators do not need to be there. Those are a poor idea to the idea. It's just a cheap, easy solution. Yep. And then the water structure, again, some of these places that these data centers are going in need increased wastewater treatment facilities, getting off septic systems and improving quality of life for citizens. They need to, I would mandate on a state level that if you come with a data center, then you're bringing wastewater treatment with you, and you have to use that water that is treated from the wastewater system to use for your process cooling systems. That way again, trying to get too close to net zero impact on the environment and community. Anyway, I could go on a whole nother soapbox for that. But
no, I love that. I love that language there, Chuck. That's good. We're going to write that one down too.
Let's talk about the water. a little bit. Now,
Oh God.
as you know, right, one of the concerns about the AI boom is the massive amounts of water that these data centers consume, and Indiana's Republican leadership hasn't given much thought to those consequences in pushing the sort of move fast and break things
Oh,
tech
here we go.
mentality across our states. But Attorney General Todd Rokita is very concerned about our water supply in one regard. He joined 13 other state attorneys general this week in petitioning the EPA to classify Mifepristone as a water contaminant, claiming, without evidence, that at-home medication abortions pose a risk to the drinking water. Medical experts note there is no data suggesting trace amounts of mifepristone are even found in the water supply, let alone that they could affect pregnancies. If it were, Casey, what this is plainly not about the water, is it?
Absolutely not. I mean, unless he's talking about the take, whenever somebody says, if you have a workplace or several people around you who are all pregnant at the same time and you make the joke, it must be in the water.
How many women do he think or does he think are taking these pills for them to have this level of impact on our water supply?
I'm also going to go with he probably hasn't read his own water testing report, because the chlorine and the fluoride and the other chemicals in main city water is way more dangerous in several of the amounts that some cities test at than what he's suing for.
He's been watching Alex Jones, right? They're giving the frogs abortions.
Right. And should we all just throw out the reminder how much money Alex Jones is court ordered to pay families for the things he said?
Yeah, this is plainly Rokita using lawfare along with these other right-wing attorneys general to look for any way possible to ban mifepristone at the federal level. I want to say something like 2/3 of all abortions at this point are now done medically at home under the supervision of telemedicine, right? Sharon, last thoughts on that before we turn back to the national headlines here.
So I have a lot of different concerns about this, but again, to my point, how many women does he think are actually regularly taking this pill? And if they go after this pill, what other medications are they going to decide are contaminating the water source? Because we've already heard conversation at the White House level about antidepressants, about about ADHD medications, about, all kinds of different medications that a lot of us take. And this just seems like setting things up for a precedent that can then become a very slippery slope for other medications that people need across this country.
Chuck, how much of a concern are like trace amounts of medication in water? This is your department.
So medications that are meant to be metabolized by the body are not the concern point that I would have with the wastewater streams. Where I have the concern is the pharmaceuticals that people flush down the drain, or illicit drugs, or the 100, sorry, brain fart, other chemicals that are used in the household that should not go down a wastewater system. I mean, wastewater systems are not designed to remove pharmaceuticals from water streams. But this argument that he's making about this medication being a threat is blatantly stupid, because he doesn't understand how biology even works. I mean, anyway, I could get into the whole biochemistry thing. So I'll just limit it to say that this is not a threat. Period. End of story. It's not that. It's just another way to limit abortion because of their screwed up.
Are you telling me
concepts.
the people who literally believe that woman was created from a man's rib don't know how biology work? How about biology works?
Oh, well, we could
Shocking.
make a whole nother show just out of that alone.
Yeah, well, listen, speaking of far-right Christian nationalists like our Attorney General Todd Rokita, let's turn to another one, and that is Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. Lots of news from the Pentagon this week. So the U.S. killed 3 more people in an alleged drug boat in the Eastern Pacific on Thursday, bringing the death toll in such strikes to at least 211 now since last September. We still have no evidence, by the way, that the people on these boats are actually drug smugglers, and as such, the Senate Armed Services Committee voted to cut Hegseth's travel funding by 75% until he provides unedited video of these boat strikes, unredacted reports on 3 2025 U.S. attacks in Yemen, and the results of a civilian harm probe into February's strike on a girls' school in Iran, which killed at least 165 innocent people. The cornered Hegseth lashed out at NATO allies, calling the alliance a, quote, paper tiger, and calling it shameful that European countries refuse to lend their bases and airspace to the illegal Iran war. He threatened to withhold U.S. contributions until the allies pass his performance test for increased defense spending. Ironically, Europe has already drastically increased defense spending in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And here's the thing. Hegseth might not actually even really be in charge at the Pentagon. A profile from The Guardian this week looked at Stephen Feinberg, the billionaire founder of a private equity firm, Cerberus Capital Management, the deputy defense secretary who was responsible for much of the day-to-day operations, including procurement. And wouldn't you know it, military contracts are being lavished on his buddies. Casey, it seems that Pete Hegseth is just like a TV character. He's playing tough guy secretary of quote unquote war, right? While actually this Feinberg guy is doing all the stuff at the Pentagon, rewarding his buddies with military contracts, making his private equity friends wealthy, and generally looting the treasury as Trump and his cronies tend to do, huh?
Well, somebody's got to do something because Pete Hegseth is spending millions of dollars on lobster.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say he was always 3 sheets to the wind.
Well, that too.
That's fair.
And finding his next ex-wife.
Wow. This just took a turn. Sorry.
Scott's never gonna say yes to you and me at the same time again.
Listen, I am having a great time. This is the best Father's Day present a boy could ask for, really. This motley crew together.
It's been very clear with this entire administration, like stuttering, that they all operate on, I'll scratch your back, you don't exploit what I'm really doing. And it's all smoke and mirrors. And the people...
Yeah, I bet there's a lot of mirrors involved in Pete Hegseth's office.
Sure there is.
Many different kinds, yes.
Weird. Okay.
So, what thoughts? Listen. Whenever we've got military and defense segments that come up, I like to get your thoughts on these, Chuck.
Sorry, I'm having to recover from the whole mirrors thing. That was. To me, this is such a clown show because you've got somebody who, by all accounts, catastrophically failed in his time being in the military, now leading or trying, quote unquote, trying to represent what it means to be in the military, what it means to be tough, and we're all this, that, and the other, and doing the whole PT joke thing, which I'm sorry, that is a comedy show just in itself. That comics are going to have material for decades after this guy. But the big thing and I wanted to kind of swing this back around to something we started with the UFC thing. the blatant use of our military in the ways that they are being used is absolutely atrocious and should just be it. I'm sorry, I'm trying to put this in the words because I get fired up on this. I mean, it is a fundamental insult to me as a veteran to see what my brothers and sisters at arms are being forced to do. And again, I'm struggling, like Casey, I feel you, I'm struggling trying to get words to process here because there's just a lot. But this guy is a joke. And in a lot of respects, he's just the figurehead. He's just the person that's out in front of the cameras. The big thing is what's happening behind the scenes and what's happening to the leadership and what's happening to our crews. There was a ship that has there has been 2 deployments of our naval vessels of over 326 days. That is insane. Okay, I will tell you from experience, being on a ship, being deployed for 6 months was rough enough, but almost a full year deployed out to sea in service of this insanity. I can't imagine what these folks are going to deal with later on. I mean, I know what I deal with on a constant basis, but I just feel so bad for those sailors and the Marines and everybody else that's been forced down this road.
100%. So we're at about the halfway point here, so I want to take this time to make sure I get in these words from our friends down at Crossroads Commons in Salem. We will be back in 45 seconds.
The Crossroads Commons in Salem, Indiana, headquartered in a historic Salem home, is holding a fundraiser to expand via the purchase of the 3/4-acre lot of land adjacent to their facility. Please consider donating or spread the word so that they can further expand their services to the community. Scan the QR code on your screen for a direct link to the donation page and help us buy the grass.
All right, and we're back, and let's talk about some uncomfortable stuff now. This week, Wired published a leaked database exposing the members of Dialog. This is Peter Thiel's invitation-only secret society, revealing 222 registrants for its upcoming August retreat near Dublin in Ireland, including NATO's Supreme Allied Commander, in Europe, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, Senator Ted Cruz is going to be there, Palantir co-founder Joe Lonsdale, Army Secretary Dan Driscoll, and others. Hey, you know who else was on the list? Interim Purdue president and former governor of Indiana, Mitch Daniels, was on this list. He's been going to these things for a while, apparently. Now, of course, it's not just Republicans and tech billionaires and military folks involved at these things. We've also got Democratic Senator Cory Booker on the list, Republican Representative Jim Himes, Maryland Governor Wes Moore, Colorado Governor Jared Polis, ADL CEO Jonathan Greenblatt, and political commentator Ezra Klein. Also notable on the left of center, Washington Post national security reporter Swad Mekanet, and left-leaning-ish billionaires Eric Schmidt of Google, Reid Hoffman from LinkedIn, and Nicholas Berggren scheduled to attend this thing. Now, this is in addition to we previously saw the 2014 invitation list leaked previously. Mitch Daniels was on that one as well, and so was former Indiana Governor and Senator Evan Bayh. Sharon, it's a big club, and we ain't in it.
Yeah. I actually read the Wired article earlier this week before I knew I was going to be on Who's Left, because I'm just a weird nerd about this type of thing. Not that, like, just weird things happening out in popular culture. And I wasn't exactly sure what I was reading at first. And then I realized what it was that I was reading. And Does anybody remember the movie that came out a few years ago on Netflix with Julia Roberts? Not Don't Look Up. It was Leave the World Behind, I believe, was the name of the movie. I can't think of what the name of the movie is, but it basically, it had Sterling K. Brown, it had Julia Roberts. Julia Roberts and her family were going out on a vacation, or like a getaway, and then the world gets like attacked while they are in it was Leave the World Behind. They get attacked. The world gets attacked while they are on this getaway out to the Hamptons, and they don't know exactly what's going on, except they've lost internet, they've lost ability to communicate, and it turns out that it is all like this deep, dark secret society. And so, of course, that's why this intrigued me, was because this sounds a lot like the secret society things that we're hearing about in dystopian fiction. And then just to see some of the names that have come out, it is incredibly disconcerting. It's incredibly, it's incredibly a lot.
This is the Epstein-Class that they talk about, right? I want to say old Jeff E. himself was on the list for that 2014 conference that we got the leaks about before. No word yet known if he actually attended. Same thing with Evan Bayh. We can't confirm that they were actually there. We do know that Evan Bayh has spent much of the last 15 years working for Leon Black and then Mark Rowan at Apollo Global Management. Leon Black prominently mentioned in the Epstein files. Does old Evan know what his boss was up to? Who knows? But Casey, to Sharon's point, these folks, it's a big club, right? And they go out on TV. You got Cory Booker. He'll go stand in front of the Senate for 25 hours straight, with full of sound and fury signifying nothing, right? They go out there. It's kayfabe. It's professional wrestling. They play fight behind closed doors. They have class solidarity, don't they?
Yes. So, first off, if all this doesn't give you the ick, I don't know how we could make it any easier for you to say that this is bad, right? This is gross. I will say, having previously worked in the Indiana Senate, that a lot of senators will fight tooth and nail on the floor in committees and then turn around and go have a drink with each other, right? That is just politics, I guess, for lack of better phrase. Now all of this takes it 100 steps further, right? We can't control who is getting invited to these things, right? I don't know the process, but if you attend, no, you got a red letter, the scarlet letter there, for sure.
Yeah,
bringing back in high school literature. Well done.
Chuck, some of these various sessions at this thing include navigating World War III. Scary, considering some of the folks, the tech AI and military folks involved in this thing. Battlefield technologies, but also build a cult. And how is your sex life? Apparently, they had a Dialog operates a matchmaking app for its members, with registrants ask if they're looking for love. Ick.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of what. Sorry, Casey just hit it right on the point there. I was about to make that there was another similar app that I think was over overused rather recently, maybe say this weekend, in by certain individuals attending a certain event. But the ick factor, yes, I mean, I guess I'll isolate it to this, that when you take in totality, where you're talking about surviving World War III, creation of a cult, or how do you navigate cult, you know, mentalities and structures and those type of things, that leads you down a very specific mindset of totalitarianism, where it is our way. This is how we're going to make life happen, and these folks are the ones guiding all this development of AI structures and all these other things. Uh, I think Casey kind of says, you know, the ick is there, but I would amplify that to the type of type of mentality there, because I mean, I don't know if there's a strong enough strong enough adjective to apply there. I can't bring
Yeah,
the
so
high school reference in.
let's tie a couple of these things directly here to Indiana electoral politics.
great.
You joked about a certain matchmaking app perhaps getting a workout this weekend in Fort Wayne. I think you're referring to Grindr, which is the gay hookup app, which seems to crash wherever Republicans congregate in large numbers.
Hey,
Went down
shade.
during the RNC a couple of years ago, when the big Charlie Kirk event was held in Arizona a while back. Grindr got a lot of usage. You can say what you will. Anyway, in Fort Wayne this weekend, Indiana Republicans gathered at their own convention to choose a nominee for Secretary of State, and they selected the pictured guy there, Max Engling, a staffer for Republican U.S. Senator Jim Banks. He won on the second ballot in a closer than expected contentious race, defeating Knox County Clerk Dave Shelton, like I said, in the second round. Incumbent Diego Morales only got 134 votes, finishing a distant third in his own party's convention. This is the same week that we found a report from the Indianapolis Star detailing that his office improperly billed taxpayers for his wife's travel, at least 3 flights and 3 conference fees in 2023 and 2024. Morales has also come under pressure on his own right for traveling to Hungary and India, maybe on the state dime. There is also a independent in this race, former Indianapolis Mayor Greg Ballard, running for Secretary of State under the new Lincoln Party banner. His campaign got in trouble this week. Apparently 10 petition signatures in Hamilton County were being challenged. 9 of the 10 addresses weren't real, and 1 legitimate address belonged to somebody other than the name listed. Now, despite this challenge, it looks like Ballard is going to make the ballot. They've reported that they have secured the requisite number of signatures to appear in November, plus a significant buffer. So now we are looking at least a 4-way race. We've got the Libertarian Lori Schilling in there as well. Engling, the far-right staffer for Banks, and Bo Bai, of course, the son of servant to the Epstein-Class Evan Bai, is the Democratic nominee. Let's see. Chuck, what do we think of this 4-way race?
It's interesting. I'll say that. I did not necessarily peg this result coming out of the GOP's convention, but honestly, I think it just sets up a very interesting campaign season. You have the 2 major parties, but Ballard kind of throwing that monkey wrench, so to speak. I'm kind of curious to see if, 1, that actually goes through. 2, what does he draw from, if anything? And then 3, how does it affect the major party candidates? Do I think on the whole the GOP have a strong leg to stand on in this election? Absolutely not. Diego has very well submarined the whole thing, as far as giving us enough to work with for all kinds of stuff. In Max, I'm sorry, there's just a lot there that can be utilized. So I would say that this is going to be a very interesting race up to November, and I'm just kind of here for. I'm gonna have the popcorn and kind of sit and watch the fun happen.
Yeah. Now, Sharon, the Indiana Democratic Party, immediately after Engling secured the Republican nomination, they came out with a statement shaming him as like a former male model, calling him grossly unqualified, and attacking him as a carpetbagger, which, saying he's not from here, he didn't grow up here. My guys, like, you need to pick a different argument in this race because the Democratic nominee, Bobai, you can say you're a seventh generation Hoosier all you want. You grew up in D.C., my dude.
Yeah, and that was a problem that a lot of people had, that he just hasn't spent a lot of time in Indiana in his adult life, or even really a good portion of his life. A point I made a little while ago in our chat was that it's starting to feel a lot like the whole government is based in carefully curated figureheads that, meet certain parameters, whether that's at the federal level or the state level. We're just seeing this more and more. But I do think that the Democratic side showed their hands a little bit too much in the lead up to the Republican convention. I think that they genuinely were at the very least hoping, or might have believed, that Diego Morales was going to be the ultimate pick, when all signs, it seemed like, were kind of pointing a different direction. And I think a lot of their plans for how to move forward with the campaign were directly related to Diego being the ultimate, or being the nominee ultimately. And so now I'm sure they are having to do some scrambling to try to decide how they're going to engage in messaging.
And again, we're all Democrats here. A couple of you are running for office as Democrats. Chuck is an elected Democratic official in his county. I am a frustrated Democrat registered still. But to your point, Bai's entire campaign strategy has been Diego Morales is corrupt. We got to get him out. Okay, well, now he's out. You talked about him too much. You gave away your hand. Now you've got a guy in there, Engling. And again, he sucks. He is Jim Banks' mini-me. And Jim Banks is perhaps one of the worst, most ghoulish people in the United States Senate. But he's also a blank slate. We don't really have a whole lot on him. Diego Morales, the corruption candidate, is now gone. Engling, clean slate. Bobai is now the corruption candidate. Not anything he did, but his nest was feathered by his dad's Epstein-Class money. Sorry, I said it.
Does he really have a clean slate, though?
He's a blank slate. There's really not much on the dude. We don't have a history on him like we have on Diego Morales. The corruption in that case was blatant. The corruption in Engling's case is theoretical. And listen, will inevitably happen because that's what Republicans do.
I think the big thing you want to look at is concepts of moving forward, because we either stick with the same system that has enabled all this to occur in the first place, or we go with a better choice that says, okay, we have an option to bring in something better. And if we can make it on that premise, I mean, now, I grant you, there are things that one person can be, swayed on one side or the other on, but I have to look at it in the generality. Bo is our candidate to move forward on as Secretary of State. I'm going to support him, and the idea of, I think he will grow and evolve, and I think he can become what we need moving forward. I have to put some faith in that at this point, because if not, what are we doing?
Listen, FDR, my favorite president, was the privileged son of the wealth class, and did right in the end. I think with that leg up, you gotta work twice as hard to earn people's trust, and that's just kind of where I'll leave that and keep it nice. So let us move on and talk about from Indiana elections to other elections, and there were several this past week. In Georgia, the November ballot is set with Representative Mike Collins moving on in the Senate race to take on John Ossoff. Now, in their governor's race, billionaire Rick Jackson won a runoff on Tuesday, defeating Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, despite both Trump and Governor Brian Kemp backing Jones. Jackson will take on former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. Alabama had runoff elections on Tuesday, where Trump endorsed Representative Barry Moore, won the Alabama Republican Senate runoff to succeed Tommy Tuberville. He will face Democrat Everett West in November in a state that hasn't elected a Democrat to the Senate since 2017. Also, Oklahoma held primaries on Tuesday. Trump endorsed Representative Kevin Hern, won the Republican Senate primary there in a bid to replace Mark Wayne Mullen, who is now the DHS secretary. In Congressional District 1 down there, that is the seat Hern is vacating. Trump endorsed Jackson Laymeyer, a self-described Christian nationalist pastor, advanced to an August runoff against State Rep Mark Tedford. But then Laymeyer dropped out of the race on Wednesday, one day after advancing, following reports he exchanged thousands of romantic texts with a campaign fundraiser. Oklahoma also rejected a minimum wage increase on Tuesday's ballot. Not surprising in a Republican state, but worth noting. D.C. held primaries as well to elect their non-voting representative to Congress, and in California, a special election to replace the disgraced Eric Swalwell. Democratic State Senator Aisha Wahab advanced to an August 18th special election runoff in that race. She, the more progressive candidate in that race, will face runner-up Melissa Hernandez in that special election, and again in November for the full term. So this runoff coming up in August just for a couple months. Casey, let me come back to you. What is notable there from you from Tuesday's elections?
So I'm going to out myself here. I was born in Georgia and lived probably half of my childhood in the Deep South. So I kind of pay attention to the southern states because Southerners have, and Sharon and I had a discussion about this weekend, there is left Democrats, Southern Democrats, and then Republicans and right? So there is an interesting shift happening in Georgia and Alabama, and it's really showing that the MAGA hold is lessening.
Only slightly.
Slightly, right. But in the South, let's look at our history. That's huge, right? Because you have a lot of people down there that call themselves Democrats who really aren't and who don't vote Democrat, but they won't call themselves Republicans. And so it's interesting to see the slight shift, but I'm grabbing my popcorn and going to keep my eye on Georgia and Alabama. My prediction, Georgia will go back to being more blue-ish purple than red. But I think Alabama their red is lightening up a bit. So I'm interested in that. Oklahoma doesn't shock me one bit. That is Oklahoma.
Yeah, let's talk about Oklahoma a little bit more. Sharon, they had a chance to vote themselves a raise and declined. Who does that?
especially with conversation across the entire country about raising minimum wages. And the only argument I could see being made for not doing that at the state level is that they're waiting for the federal level to take over and do it instead. But it doesn't make sense, right? The fact that something like that even made it to what I assume was a referendum or something similar, something that notably is illegal in Indiana, at least currently. It's just interesting that it made it as far as it did, which kind of says, and I don't know the process in Oklahoma, but it says, okay, someone decided that this needed to be on a ballot, and enough people said yes to it being on the ballot that it got on the ballot. And then for it to be, what were the numbers there? It was
like 55-45, but I think it's notable
10%.
they buried it in a primary. Chuck, This is something that should have been up for grabs in a general election.
That's very true.
Absolutely, because we all know it. Voter turnout in a primary is typically low. People don't often invest as much into it, and that's a failure on us as a systemic failure nationwide, because people need to be more engaged. And unfortunately, some things, like in Scott, you pointed out, if they bury it, they're counting on that mental overload, because you get asked several different questions along a ballot or different people. You may not know all those answers, or you may not be familiar with it or had time, because as a working professional, let's face it, when do you have time? Or if you're working 2 or 3 jobs, just to try and sustain yourself because of the federal government not wanting to raise the minimum wage, which is what, $7.25 an hour, which, I'm sorry, I was making that when I was in high school at frickin' McDonald's, for God's sakes. So, I mean, again, waiting on the feds to do something, I think is one problem. The putting it in a primary is definitely a problem, and then not having the ability to inform our electorates what is going on is another part of it. So it's not just one single thing. I think it's a confluence of a lot of different elements all together. And I think if we push, like we are with independent media, this program and others, we're starting to make impacts in those roads. We're starting to get people more involved in the system, especially at a local level. So hopefully, maybe we can turn some tides. Not going to be everywhere, but hey, we'll take a win where we can get it.
Yeah, 100%. So, we mentioned California. They had that special election on Tuesday, and their governor has come under the watchful eye of the Trump administration. And we found out this week that Gavin Newsom and his wife, Jennifer Siebel Newsom, are under investigation by the Department of Justice, with the FBI and IRS agents contacting more than a dozen family, friends, and former employees. This is most likely retaliation for his criticism of President Trump, and obviously they're looking to, Newsom is an early favorite as one of the potential nominees for the Democratic candidacy in 2028. The FBI also raiding the Cleveland offices of the Ohio Organizing Collaborative. This is a voting rights and criminal justice reform group. They've been around since 2007. FBI raid their offices, seized documents, seized computers, questioned the staff for hours, and visited some of the employees at their homes. Keep in mind, Ohio has hotly contested elections coming up this year, with Democrats with a chance to win at the state level for the first time in a while. Democrat Amy Acton is challenging the unpopular Republican Vivek Ramaswamy for the governorship there, and former Senator Sherrod Brown looking to get back into the U.S. Senate against Republican John Ousted. Also, perhaps the most scary use of government weaponization, still theoretical, but something that the Trump administration has definitely talked about. New York Times had this one. Secret memos obtained by the Times reveal that the Trump White House actively debated suspending habeas corpus. That is, of course, the constitutional right to challenge one's detention before a judge. They were going to use this to accelerate deportations, with Stephen Miller, of course, as the chief instigator there. Trump was personally interested, and it turns out only White House Staff Secretary Will Scharf, himself a longtime hardcore Trump loyalist, saying, hey, whoa, we should really consider pulling this thing back, and Chief of Staff Susie Wiles agreeing with him. Chuck, habeas corpus is one of the foundational principles, not just of the U.S. Constitution, but even going back to the Magna Carta. This is, a fundamental cornerstone of democratic governance.
Yeah, and I have to try and limit how much I'm going to go on this because I have a whole thing lined out in my head. But the big thing I'd say is this: is that if it is something that can be suspended, then it wasn't a right; it's a privilege, and that's what they're trying to treat it as. We, as the American people, have rights that were enshrined in the founding of our nation. We have the fundamental right to defend ourselves against accusation. To even consider suspending something, the bedrock of what our Constitution or what our nation is built on, throws the whole thing basically in the dumpster. And if we don't call this stuff out for what it is, I mean, these people are deeply unserious. They don't care about people's rights. They don't care about individualism. They want to impose their will on everyone and make people fit into their little camps that Stephen Miller decides they need to be in, and control folks left, right, and sideways. And this would have been, democracy would have died right then and there, in my opinion.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's
Casey,
and it's
you have
disturbing.
thoughts. You're chomping at the bit.
I was trying to wrap it up.
As someone who works in the criminal justice field, I can't even begin to tell you the dangerous implications that this would have, even having the thought of doing this, that this would have on every single person, not citizen, not even non-citizen, every person that is in the continental U.S. and Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. Oh, sorry. If smoke is coming out of my ears, just know that I am like shaking with anger that this was even a suggestion.
Mhm.
Because I think about what I do every single day, Monday through Friday. And habeas corpus is a very big piece of that. And knowing what that would do to my job, the people that I'm responsible for, is terrifying. Knowing that you can be put in jail or detained wherever for nothing before even having a conversation with a lawyer or having a judge approve your detention is so terrifying for every person who hears that, because it gives some historical vibes from a country across the big pond, if you catch my drift. And that should terrify everyone if that is the direction that this administration, that party, is wanting to head in.
I want to, heavy stuff there, Sharon. I want to sort of get away from the big theoretical and talk about the personal here with these, Newsom, Gavin Newsom in California being the target of some of these investigations. Please don't make this asshole a martyr. Like, I know he and his comms team do a good job pushing back at Trump, but we talked about the big Epstein-Class and all the folks, all the politicians who were supported by the same group of billionaires. Gavin Newsom's one of those guys, and I do not want him to be some sort of martyr by the Trump administration to thrust him into the lead for 2028. Gavin Newsom sucks, I said.
Well, we saw what happened the last time a politician was pushed into a murder position. Right? I believe that is the same individual who we were just talking about, whose people wanted to suspend habeas corpus. Do I think that Gavin Newsom's on that level of evil? I don't know. Probably not. But I feel like murderdom is clearly not the play for politicians that we want to be of good character and who are going to actually do good things for our country.
Malcolm X in the 1960s talked about the wolf and the fox, right? And how the overt white racists are the wolf. You know what you're getting. Donald Trump is the wolf. Gavin Newsom is the fox. He is the white moderate who looks like he is smiling, but is actually just another servant of the billionaire class doing the bidding. The man is a snake. I do not trust him. Just because you got a D next to your name doesn't mean you're one of the good ones. To that effect, a handful of Democrats, a fair number of them, support the continuing existence of immigrations and customs enforcement. Let's talk a little bit about ICE this week. So in Minnesota, federal prosecutors charged 15 Minnesotans with conspiracy to impede federal immigration agents during the operations there earlier this winter. The 96-page indictment relies heavily on federal surveillance of encrypted signal messages. So, hey, make sure y'all know who's in your signal chats, everybody. Notably, the indictment documents no injuries to federal agents from the accused. There were 2 assault charges involved knocking papers from an agent's hands. Okay. The judge in this case released all the defendants with 2 conditions: no contact with co-defendants and no protesting on federal property. Speaking of protests, about 80 folks converged on the St. Paul federal courthouse during the hearings in solidarity with the defendants. Next door to Minnesota, in Wisconsin, a federal judge upheld the obstruction conviction of former Milwaukee County Circuit Judge Hannah Dugan. You remember her. She helped an immigrant evade ICE agents who showed up at her courthouse in April of last year. She resigned after conviction amid Republican impeachment threats and faces up to 5 years in prison. Not all bad news on the ICE front, though. In the small Georgia town of Social Circle, they have appeared to ward off an ICE detention center there. A warehouse in that community was purchased by the Department of Homeland Security with plans to turn it into a detention center for up to 10,000 people. And there's an Indiana angle this week where a federal judge ordered ICE to release Salah Sarsour, president of the Islamic Society of Milwaukee. He had been held here at Clay County Jail in Indiana. He is a lawful permanent resident, has been in the country for over 30 years, is a pillar of his community. Roughly 150 supporters, many of whom come from a Jewish interfaith group, held a vigil outside the jail until his release. Casey, that's not far from where you're at, eh?
That is actually District 38. So, yes, that is in the district that I will be representing come November. And yes, Clay County does have an ICE detention center, and they did have a protest. The comments on social media were wild. The majority of the comments I saw that the 150 people that showed up were actually paid protesters. They weren't. They were community members who paid from their own pockets to come down here. I'm happy to see that a judge is ordering his release because, hello, habeas corpus. Let's tie in the previous segment.
Casey, what's it going to take for that area there, Clay County specifically, to do something like what they've done down in that community in Georgia, for the locals to rise up and say, hey, we don't want this sort of thing here?
That's a good question. I think that, well, let me start it this way. Some of the people in the detention center aren't even local. They're coming from...
Yeah, this guy's from Milwaukee.
Exactly. And a lot of it is done under the cloak of the darkness, so people don't know. And that's where I think if we show people what is actually happening, I don't know if in your areas, but in our local area, we have several social media groups called scanner pages and mugshot pages. And it does show ICE holds. And I think the growing popularity in those might actually help our arguments on stopping the ICE detention. Also, I think showing the community that it's costing their community dollars and their taxpayer dollars, because Indiana has not received the reimbursements from the feds.
Yeah, they sell these things as like it's going to be a benefit to the local communities. We're going to pay you extra to house these detainees from out of your local jurisdiction, and they're still waiting on reimbursement in many of these cases. Sharon, scary stuff up there in Minnesota, though. Like, these are folks who, peaceful protesters. They were charged with conspiracy and basically labeled domestic terrorists, members of Antifa, which, if you know anything about this national security presidential memo number 7 that came out last year, anybody who calls themselves an anti-fascist, an anti-capitalist, opposes Christian nationalism, they're going to label you a domestic terrorist.
Which has gotten only scarier and scarier, especially as they have gotten more and more militant about some of the things that they are doing. Because you look at it as an average citizen and you go, how can I fight against this and not be labeled with these labels that could then get me put in jail? But also, how do you not fight it at the same time? I find it really interesting because it sounds like a lot of the strategies that they are claiming were domestic terrorism in these situations are very similar to strategies that we heard about on, let's see, what day was that? January 6th, 2021. Just all sounds super familiar, right? And so it's just really interesting that now it is domestic terrorism, whereas previously it was destroying one of the most important places in our country, but not domestic terrorism because it was under a different umbrella.
Chuck, all of these terms, right? They are malleable, and whoever is in power gets to write them, right?
Sadly, to a degree and extent, I guess I'll encapsulate it that, to start back with ICE, that do I believe that ICE needs to continue as it is? No. I think it needs to return to its original conception and mission of, helping facilitate immigrants as they come into the country, not to go through this illegal, this detention idea.
Because you're not sneaking in illegal like oranges to Canada or something.
Yeah, I mean it's. I mean, the term in legal human, I don't know. I have difficulties with that statement in and of itself, but this labeling of what a domestic terrorist is and how it runs adverse to the machinations of those in charge. That's dangerous. I mean, that is how Putin has put himself in his position. That's how some of these other dictatorial people have gotten into the positions they are. And we have to resist it at every level possible by getting electing people like Casey and Sharon and getting them in the right spots where they can help us avoid these things. Because you're right, it's a slippery slope. When you start labeling people as anything other than human, it becomes easy to discount them, and it becomes easier to negate rights. And again, goes back to the habeas corpus idea. We're going to keep circling to that one. But when you can eliminate those things, when you can dehumanize people, that's where you run into the greatest threat against what the nation stands for and what it should stand for.
100%. We could talk about this in and of itself for hours. And the same thing with this next topic, which unfortunately we have to sort of speed run through, but important stuff. The Education Department announced plans this week to move the Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services to HHS and the Office for Civil Rights to DOJ. This splits the two offices that together are supposed to enforce IDEA, that's the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act, the 50-year-old law guaranteeing a free and appropriate public education for students with disabilities. Again, now the core concern here, IDEA is an education law, not a medical one, has nothing to do with HHS, and it is not a DOJ issue. Families already fighting to get their kids into schools are going to have an even harder time getting the appropriate education for their kids as the Trump admin seeks to dismantle DOE. Now, a couple Indiana angles here. The Department of Education approved our state's waiver from provisions of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, consolidating $50 million in federal Title I, II, III, and IV grants into a block-style arrangement. What will happen is schools no longer have to file separate compliance reports for each federal grant program. Now, this potentially frees up educators to from administrative roles back into the classroom. So that would be a good thing. But again, these targeted grants exist for specific reasons, and turning them into block grants could remove the requirement that money actually reach the populations it's supposed to. Also in Indiana, on the early childhood education front, our state's Office of Early Childhood and Out of School Learning proposed a massive overhaul of child care licensing rules, changing 90-plus sections of code, including dropping education requirements so that lead caregivers would need only a high school diploma instead of any early childhood training or credentials. And to all of this, what you get is Indiana receiving an F in public education report from the Network for Public Education and ranking 29th out of 50 in the Annie E. Casey Foundation's Kids Count, ranking its worst position since 2021 and a 4-spot decline. Chuck, the state of education in Indiana, not great. It has very much to do with this thought from above, from Republicans at the national level, that we need to privatize everything. You're seeing that. That's part of the reason they're breaking up the Department of Education in Washington. That's part of the reason you have these vouchers here in our state.
Yeah, and again, I've hit on this topic in multiple different ways. That, I mean, my mom was a public education teacher for 35 years. So this hits close to home for me. And public education is a fundamental need for our nation, because when you go into private education, it goes down a whole different road. I mean, you can get into the theocracy type of constructs, and you can get into these various nuances that don't need to be there. What we need is to reinvest in public ed and stop demonizing it. These teachers deal with situations that are so difficult with so little funding and resource and so little support. I mean, I stand in awe of how teachers do their jobs every day, because it's almost an impossible mountain. So in this demonization that they've gone through of they've taken money away from schools, then blaming schools for failing because they can't do their jobs because of lack of funding. So they're creating the problem, saying, hey, there's a problem. We have to do this, this, and this to fix it. And it's just, it, again, it goes back to the earlier smoke and mirrors idea of defund and then cause it a problem and then make it something that they can choose to point out as a problem of,
Yeah.
different realities.
Sharon, you're an educator. Go off.
Go off indeed. As someone who has spent a good number of years studying specifically how to make education better for people who struggle with learning in a variety of ways, I can't help but think of a little bit of an allegory here. Anybody remember 2008? And what happened in 2008? We had banks who had been engaging in really weird funding things for a number of years, and they were on the bubble. And what did we do? We saved them because of capitalism. But to Chuck's point, we have defunded education, and now we're pointing at it and going, oh, it's a problem, when the problem was caused by people who were making decisions. And we're doing it to our most at-risk population. So you take kids in general. Kids are our most at-risk population. They cannot take care for themselves. They have to be cared for themselves. But then you're adding on to the issues for low-income kiddos, for kiddos who are suffering from various disabilities, who need additional resources, and we're taking even more resources away from them. And the fact that the IDEA is only a 50-year-old law is also disgusting. But that's a talk with Scott and I for an hour probably. It is just utterly abysmal how we are treating our children, and then we want our children to turn around and serve this country the day that they turn 18 years old. And
you mentioned
no
Sharon.
sense.
Yeah, the kids are our most vulnerable population, and then they pick on the most vulnerable of the most vulnerable with these things. Casey, I can't tell you how much this attack on the IDEA upsets me. My son relied on that law. He had an IEP, before 50 years ago. He wouldn't have received a proper public education, and because of these things. These far-right Christian nationalists, they always talk about being pro-life and the dignity of humans, and yet they would refuse to see the dignity in disabled kids and give them the proper education and cultivate. So many of these folks are brilliant minds with bodies that don't work the right way all the time. I'm gonna get misty.
So let me go off on behalf of your child and so many other Hoosier children. So let me unpack a couple things. First off, as a former DCS worker, the removal of these child care regulations, children will die. Point blank. Those protections were put in place not to hinder business, but to promote safety for children. You get away from those and children will die. I can't tell you how many DCS calls come in because of childcare facilities. And it's only going to increase. Moving away from that and now on to education. My husband is a public school teacher. So this is my livelihood. This is what helps us pay our bills. My husband dedicates his life to children. Our best friends are special ed teachers and special ed deans. So my anger is getting the best of me. Why should any child get a better education than the next one sitting by them because they think differently? That's wrong. And why should any child receive a better education or have a better school building because they live in one zip code and not another. Our rural community schools are dying. And people want to say, oh, don't you want to choose what school you go to? It's parent choice. Yeah, that sounds great, except when you don't have a choice. Or you have to bus your kid 2 hours to go to the closest school.
Yeah. It's a disaster. The privatization of public schools in our state winds up hurting the people who often vote for the Republicans who are doing this. Rural schools in particular are hurt precisely by what you said. There are no choices out there. You got your public school and that's it. And the funding being stripped out of those schools is paying for wealthy parents who were already sending their kids to private schools to get a discount in doing so. We've got to move on. We're coming up on the end here. A quick update. So, last week we talked about the severe storms that had tore through the area the previous Thursday night. An update on that count. 21 tornadoes were confirmed in Indiana the week before this past one. Mind you, 22 tornadoes is the average for a full year in our state. So we had a year's worth of tornadoes in one day, and then this week, another 5 were confirmed across southern Indiana, including one that cut a wide swath of destruction across rural Monroe County here. If that thing had been a couple miles south of where it went through, it would have caused very significant damage and loss of life. Fortunately, it was mostly through wilderness, the Morgan Monroe Forest there. We are expecting more severe weather in our area down here in southern Indiana today. So everybody be safe out there. But finally this week, Martinsville, a town long marked by its history as a sundown town and the 1968 murder of a black individual, held its first ever Juneteenth celebration this Friday to a standing room only crowd at the Martinsville Area Senior Center. Organizer Janine Lee Ferrer, who moved from Muncie, where Juneteenth has been celebrated for years, said friends initially questioned whether the organization was wise. I saw folks online questioning whether it was even real or whether it was some sort of joke. But she, who now lives in Martinsville, said she is proud to be there. One attendee who drove in from Indianapolis offered a generational perspective, saying, quote, I know I've changed from 30 years ago. It's good to see that Martinsville is trying to change and trying to lead a new legacy. Organizers there are already planning a larger venue for next year. Sharon, you love to see it.
You absolutely love to see it. You love to see people who have been part of this country since the beginning of this country finally getting the celebration, the recognition that they deserve because they helped build this country. They deserved all of the freedom that they took way too freaking long to be given. And they deserve to get to celebrate those wins that they fought so long and so hard for. And it's great to see that we are seeing it in more and more communities across our country.
Yeah. Now, Chuck, I'm down here in Bloomington. Martinsville's the next town up the road. I've been here for a little over 25 years at this point, and I remember, like, when I first moved down here, there were still tense race relations when the basketball teams from Bloomington, which had a lot of players of color, would go to Martinsville and be heckled by the fans up there. We have changed a lot in a short amount of time here. And again, you love to see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, humans are human, and we need to recognize and celebrate that reality. And embracing all of our diversity in as many ways as we can is absolutely a beautiful thing and what we should be doing. Now, I will comment though that on Juneteenth, I noticed that the B&B was not closed. They actually had to remain open because the state had not designated it as a holiday that they get at this point, which I found rather strange. So that could be another strange topic there.
Interesting choice there, Republican government in Indiana. Casey, final words on this topic go to you today.
I am proud to say that my county gave us the holiday, and I was proud to participate in our local Juneteenth program. It gets bigger and better every year, and I look forward to seeing Indiana as a whole progress with this, because our high schools as well have had issues with traveling to Martinsville with athletes of color. So that's huge. So kudos to Martinsville for doing that and sparking that change. I give all the counties who declared it a holiday for their local governments and state government. We got to do better. Like putting Sharon and myself in the state house.
And I think this goes to show a lot of times folks like us on the Democratic left have been known to pigeonhole rural communities like Martinsville, communities that maybe used to be sundown towns and have complicated racial histories dating back for the last many decades. Things are not the way they used to be. We cannot refuse to go into these spaces and talk to folks, and there is common ground wherever you go, and I think most people are a lot more open and inclusive than we give them credit for, especially nowadays. So, again, you love to see it. Hey, we made it to the end. We mostly didn't go overtime too much, and I want to give all of you a chance to tell the folks where they can find you. And Chuck, I'm going to start up there in the corner with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. You can find us at Hancock County Democrats. We do have in July our speaker series coming up with one of our candidates. So please check that out. We'll have it on YouTube. You can always reach out to me via YouTube, Facebook, all the socials. You can find me MS2 CG Gill. You'll find me. No worries.
All right. Casey, keeping it clockwise. How can folks learn more about you and your campaign and maybe help you out, donate, volunteer?
Absolutely. I have an Act Blue account at Blundell for Indiana. Also, follow me on Facebook, Casey Blundell for Indiana State Senate. And my email, which I respond to emails, is blundellforindiana@gmail.com.
All right. Very good. And Sharon, same thing to you. How can the folks help out you, learn more about your campaign, donate, volunteer, all that good stuff?
Well, if you happen to be up close enough to Fort Wayne, I am hosting an event this Thursday evening from 5 to 8. This week, this Wednesday is the anniversary of the overturn of Roe versus Wade. So that event will be kind of surrounded around that because that is a situation that's very near and dear to my own heart. You can find me at electsharonwhite.com. You can also find me at facebook.com/electsharonwhite or electsharonwhite@gmail.com. And I was also just designated one of the MVPs from Mad Voters. And so I'm very happy to have earned that designation. And I hope that I will remain true to that throughout my campaign. And I hope people like Scott and Chuck and Casey will call me out if I do not.
Oh, we will. We're watching you.
I got you.
Shout out to Mad Voters. They're a great organization. So thank you all for being with me. Of course, folks, you know where to find our guests. You can find me online on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. Send me a DM on any of those socials with feedback. Also, support our work at Progressive Indiana Network. The website there is progressiveindiana.net. Follow PIN on social media at Progressive Indiana Network on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it is PIN Indiana. I am back on Tuesday with my first international interview. I've got British author Metin Tekin, who wrote a fantastic book about eliminating the party system from Western democracies. Fantastic stuff there. Concerned Clergy every Thursday morning. Derek Holder with Hold 'em Accountable on Friday afternoons. All right. We can't do any of it again without your support. So please like, share, comment, and review for us. Donate and volunteer to our candidates today. Until next time, I'm Scott Aaron Rogers signing off from Bloomington. Love each other, Indiana.